So I decided to record this video for YouTube because there isn't much information to be found on the Marantz SC80. So this is a preamplifier from early 90s, the first half of the 90s, that Marantz brought out together with a power amplifier, the SM80. The SM80 is, however, design that I would think is largely based on their integrated amplifiers, the very popular ones from that time, the 80 and the 82. What the SM80, the power amplifier version, has is a few more units of the same transistors to have more power output. Obviously the design is a bit different. Maybe I can record a video on that one day on the SM80. And I think that generally speaking the SM80 will be considered a good design based on that integrated amplifier. The SC80, this preamplifier, from the looks, and you will see here in the image, that it doesn't seem to be anyhow related to the integrated amplifier. It seems a generally new design, specifically for the purpose of being a preamplifier. I will argue it's a complex design. I will comment a little bit on what you see, just in case you are thinking of buying one of those units second-hand for repair, as I did, that you know what you are getting yourself into. So the video is recorded now that the project is completely finished. This has been a very long project. I actually bought this preamplifier. I have two units. I have this black one, the most common outfit of Marantz amplifiers at that time, and I have another unit in champagne color. The champagne color I will finish repairing soon. I did use this black unit for rehearsal, practicing a little bit my skills of repairing this model. And as I was commenting, all the caps have been replaced, and when I say all, I mean literally all. So I've replaced the caps in the standby section that you have here on the left. Let me put it a bit clearer on the camera. So you have here a standby section that also has these two outputs. Here you see a board with the bass treble regulation. Also all the caps have been replaced. Control board, all the capacitors have been replaced. And the main board that you see over here, which I think I counted some, I think it has some 30 caps in it, if not more, quite a few. And there is a hidden one. So here in the front, behind those buttons, there is a circuit board. And if you unscrew the circuit boards, you will find one more capacitor that has to do with the remote sensor. So all of them have been replaced in this unit. Here's the remote sensor. Now this is a bit of a tricky or special amplifier. Let me turn it a little bit so that you can see it better in the image. Because it has one hell of a lot of transistors that create a lot of heat. This board probably consumes and generates the heat of a small amplifier. Maybe if you have an integrated amplifier, a British one, from some 20, 25, 30 watts, I wouldn't be surprised that this generates as much heat, if not more. And probably the consumption is around the same. You see here in the image that there are 4 transistors in the preamplifier section. There are another 4 transistors in the phono preamplification, and you see that they have cooling fins. They are not the original transistors. The original transistors are smaller without any cooling block. I will come back to that topic on that subject, because there is a reason why they have now these cooling fins. Now you will see here in the power section, which is this area, you see another 2 transistors with quite large blocks, and believe me, when it's on, it's pretty warm. You will see another transistor over here, and in the standby circuit another transistor. And probably if I look around, I will find some other smaller transistors. As a matter of fact, yes, indeed, there are in the main board quite a few other smaller scale transistors. Now, these main 8 transistors in this section, so the ones from the preamplifier as the phono amplifier, like I said, they generate a lot of heat, and they are the main cause of finding those preamplifiers from Marantz in a bad shape, because they heat or overheat the capacitors around them. Then the capacitors leak, and as they leak, they obviously end up damaging the board. This board, if I was taking it out and showing it from beneath, you will identify some areas that have been slightly damaged. I've cleaned it with isopropyl alcohol, so that's why it looks now fresh again and clean, but obviously this preamplifier is now, at time of recording this video, it's close to 30 years old. So obviously it had a level of dust and leakage of capacitors that was making it, look certainly less fresh than what you see now. And these transistors were changed for larger ones that are compatible, larger ones that allow to connect a cooling fin. And that's why you see all these homebrew cooling fins screwed on, which now improve the heat management of this preamplifier largely. Still, I will argue that it is still a very warm section, these areas. When you have the preamplifier on for a couple of hours, you can clearly identify that this area is hot. As you see, this is the, so if I put the camera up a little bit, you see here I have the cover. The cover has 2 cooling sections. The cooling sections come over the transformer, the main transformer and standby section, which I will argue this is not the one that is generating that much heat. Nevertheless, so there is one of the areas of cooling, and the other cooling is very well placed on top of the high density transistor area. But even with that cooling, still when you have it on for a couple of hours, and if you take off the cover, you can still notice that the heat accumulates around those areas, while other areas are clearly cooler in the preamplifier. So I would say that this preamplifier has a little of, if you don't make this modification, it has a bit of a tendency to, let's just call it, auto-destroy itself. Because basically if you keep the original transistors and you keep using it, it overheats those capacitors, the capacitors leak, and they end up damaging the board and also the pins of the transistors themselves, because it's all very close together. This preamplifier I bought, like I said, many years ago. I think I bought it in 2007 approximately, or 2006. So it hadn't run that much back then. And that was actually the first modification that I had done, having the transistors replaced with those ones with the cooling fins. That was done by a friend. At that time we also replaced some of the capacitors, all the ones that you see over here and here in the phono section. Also here in the phono section there are a few more. Let me twist that a little bit. All these capacitors were replaced with Panasonics back then. I could get exactly the right specification at that time. Now we are in 2023 and it is more complex, so the champagne version I will have to replace with the next size of capacitor. So instead of 270 microfarad, it will be a 330 that I will be replacing them with. Still very close in specification, but not exactly as they come out of the box. Sizes, you will still today find capacitors that are in similar sizes, if not smaller, fitting generally speaking quite well. I replace those with, so these, the blue, everything that you see from Nichicon, these light blue as the champagne ones, they have been replaced this year. And I took most of the, I think it is the UF series of Nichicon, if I remember the code right, which is a series that manage heat a little bit better. They are 105 degree capacitors instead of the standard 85 used in audio. That helps it to manage better, but still it's a very good class capacitor. That is actually slightly more expensive than the Nichicon Golds. Not being a specialist in capacitors, I have the feeling from the documentation that I found that this series is actually like the quality of a gold, but made for 105 degrees. And they are a bit more expensive because of that, because that better heat management or higher resistance in temperature. But they are equally audio grade capacitors from Nichicon. Now, I didn't have the feeling that these cooling fins are a problem. They seem of the right size. They get warm because, like I said, this amplifier, that power section, yeah, it seems to be managing an amount of watt similar to what an amplifier will be managing. So not surprisingly, those two transistors have apparently quite some work to do, and that's why these cooling fins get warm. But nothing worrisome. It seems like the right temperature management, what was not the case in this area, as I've mentioned in the beginning. And you will see also two transformers in the power section, which I guess is what makes this preamplifier a bit unique. A bit unique because it's not very common. I will put it in the image again. It's not very common to see a preamplifier section with transformers, or at least not common in this sort of electronics, and not in the Japanese electronics of that time. Again, in this price range, seems like an uncommon choice. And yeah, we could argue if it is a good choice for this price point. How does it sound? I don't have enough references to tell you, or not enough comparisons. I've noticed, obviously, and that's not surprisingly, after changing all the capacitors, the sound seems improved, much improved. It was lacking detail. I would say dynamics, detail have improved, more clarity. But yeah, that's obviously to be expected. After 30 years, the capacitors were, without doubt, they were beyond their specs. They were not operating correctly anymore. Some other things that I've noticed is all the volume regulators, or all the bass, treble, balance, all these regulators, obviously after all these years, were scratching when you were twisting them. I've cleaned them with the famous, I forgot the name, but the famous spray, the Dioxid D2, I think is or D5, I forgot now the code. I've cleaned them with Dioxid and they work marvelously. I was really surprised how smooth they are compared to other amplifiers that I've fixed with the same spray. The spray is genius. It fixes any volume meter that you have problems with. It does a great job, but particularly these Marantz must have used some very good quality Alps. So they are Alps, I've checked them. And they must be of a very good quality, because after I treat them with Dioxid, they are really smooth. It's almost like a new amplifier. So yes, if you're considering to buy secondhand one of those guns, you have to be aware that you will have to do that change of transistors. I bought this set of transistors back in 2007. I still have more units for the other for the Champagne unit, so I don't think I will need to buy any new transistor. I still have enough of them. I don't know if you can still source them. If you're gonna repair, I hope that you are lucky and find them. And like I said, you will have trouble finding these capacitors in these areas. So preamplification, phono amplification, and this is the headphone amplification. You will have trouble to find exactly that spec, the 270 but you can, well, you will have to consider, like I will do in the Champagne unit, to replace them for 330s. A wide range of voltages. Following advice from my friend more expert in this topic, when you cannot find the same voltage, go for a higher voltage. Actually, generally speaking, it cannot harm to put a higher voltage. So there are a couple of areas of the circuit board where maybe the specification was 35 volt or 16 volt, and I've put instead 1625, or instead of 2535 or 50 volt. So it should behave now more robust to all that overheating that this preamplifier shows out of the box.